Okay, so when you hear the word environmentalism, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably science, right? Or maybe politics. But today, we're going to look at it through a totally different lens. One that starts not with a carbon footprint, but with this really powerful, kind of poetic metaphor for renewal.
I mean, just think about that for a second. This idea that new life, even something as profound as resurrection, can start in what just looks like dirt and decay, that's our jumping off point. It's a concept that's really guiding how some Christian communities are thinking about climate change, helping them find this incredible potential for restoration right in the middle of a crisis.
So how exactly do you get from a compost pile to a whole environmental ethic? Well, the journey starts with some really foundational theology, which is laid out in this fascinating report by the Christian Reformed Church. It pretty much underpins this entire creation care movement.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. They talk about this idea of God's two books. The thinking, which goes way back, is that God reveals himself in two ways. First, through Scripture, obviously, but also through creation itself, the natural world around us. So the health of creation becomes this form of witness. And if that witness is damaged, through a polluted river or a smoggy sky, it's like you're distorting one of God's messages.
And this takes us all the way back to what's described as humanity's very first job description. And I want you to notice the language here. It doesn't say humans were put in the garden to own it or to take whatever they wanted from it. The words are to serve it and to keep it. That sets up a totally different kind of relationship, not one of dominance, but one of caretaking.
And if we dig into the original Hebrew, this whole idea gets even more profound. The verbs they used are super specific. Avad, which is translated as serve, is the very same word used for serving God, and shema, to keep, means something more like a loving, protective guardianship. The point is, this suggests a sacred duty, a relationship built on deep respect and active, sustaining care for the planet.
And this brings us to a major point of tension. For centuries, that word dominion has often been interpreted as domination, a view that was even used to justify conquering lands with policies like the doctrine of discovery. But this creation care framework completely rejects that. Instead, it pushes for dominion as stewardship, arguing that, hey, the earth is the Lord's and we're just the tenants. Our job is upkeep, not ownership.
Okay, so if that's the ideal, what's the reality we're living in? The next part of the report makes a hard pivot from that theological foundation right into our present-day crisis, framing our environmental challenges as a direct result of us failing at that original job.
And they don't shy away from the data. I mean, just look at this chart. It shows 300,000 years of history. See how the CO2 and temperature lines track each other almost perfectly, up and down, up and down? Now, look all the way over to the far right. That nearly vertical line shooting straight up, that's us. That's now. It's a spike that is completely outside of the natural cycle. And the report is crystal clear about the cause, pointing right to the broad scientific consensus that this change is overwhelmingly human-induced. So inside this theological framework, this isn't just some abstract scientific problem, it's seen as a direct consequence of our actions, or our inaction.
And this is where the whole thing becomes an issue of justice. The report really hammers home that the people who've contributed the least to this problem are the ones suffering the most. We're talking about farmers in the African Sahel facing more and more drought, or entire island nations like Tarawa that are literally at risk of disappearing under rising seas. For this movement, that injustice makes climate change a profoundly moral and ethical issue.
So, given the scale of the crisis, what's the response? Well, the report doesn't just diagnose the problem and leave it there. It actually offers a practical, faith-based guidebook for how to move forward, and it's all organized around three core principles. The first principle is earth-keeping, and that should sound familiar, right? It's a direct echo of that Hebrew verb we talked about earlier, shamar. The logic is really simple and powerful. Just as we are cared for and sustained, we have a responsibility to give that same care and sustenance back to the creation we live in. The second one is fruitfulness. This is all about balance. It says, yes, we should absolutely enjoy the bounty of the earth, but not in a way that destroys its ability to be fruitful for future generations and for all the other creatures that share this planet with us. And the third principle, Sabbath, is really fascinating. It takes this familiar idea of a day of rest and applies it to the land itself. It's a radical call to literally build rest and recovery into our agricultural and economic systems, to give ecosystems the time and space they need to heal.
Now, I know this can all start to feel a little bit abstract. Earth-keeping, fruitfulness, what does that actually look like?
Well, to figure that out, let's bring this whole thing full circle, right back to where we started.
Let's look at this simple act of composting. You gather up what seems like waste, dead, useless stuff. You let the process of decay do its thing, and out of that, you create something new and incredibly life-giving that can nourish the next generation of growth. It's a perfect, small-scale model of all three principles in action: earth-keeping, fruitfulness, and even a Sabbath rest for the soil. It's just like this writer for Busted Halo put it, this simple practice becomes a tangible act of faith. You're believing in renewal even when all you can see is rot. It's this powerful, hands-on connection to that whole theme of resurrection.
And of course, the applications go way beyond the compost pile. We're talking about planting community gardens, adopting and caring for local parks, organizing cleanup days, or even doing an energy audit of your own home. It's all about getting your hands dirty in what another source so beautifully calls sacramental dirt, having a tangible encounter with the work of creation.
So, we end with this question. This entire framework is really an invitation to shift our perspective. It asks us to look at the huge challenges we're facing, environmental and otherwise, and to wonder, what if this isn't just the end? What if all this decay is actually the raw material, the compost, for a new and more hopeful beginning?